The Sherman burned like a torch against the snow, black smoke rolling into the gray winter sky as German tanks closed in from every direction, their engines growling low and steady, confident, patient, already sure the fight was over. December 1944 had turned the Ardennes forest into a frozen maze of trees, ice, and shattered roads, and inside that maze an American tank commander was climbing out of the wreckage of his M4 Sherman, knowing one thing for certain. Walking away wasn't going to work. The Germans had planned this attack for months, and it showed. Their armor pushed forward in tight formations, Panthers and Tigers rolling through gaps the Americans didn't even know existed, cutting supply lines, isolating units, and turning strong positions into death traps within hours. The Sherman had never stood a real chance. Its armor was thin, its guns struggled against German heavy tanks, and when the first Tiger appeared through the smoke, the outcome had been decided before the trigger was even pulled. One shot, one flash, then fire everywhere. The crew escaped, barely, diving into the snow as ammunition cooked off behind them, and when the smoke cleared they realized something far worse than losing their tank. They were behind enemy lines, surrounded by German armor, with no friendly units in sight and no safe road out. Quick thing before we continue. If stories like this get your heart racing, hit that subscribe button because WW2 Vault dives into the most insane moments of World War II every week. And this one is just getting started. Because what happened next wasn't an escape story, and it wasn't a last stand either. It was the moment an American tanker looked at the wreckage of his Sherman, looked at the enemy tanks hunting him, and decided to steal one of theirs and turn the entire battlefield upside down. Before that moment makes sense, you have to understand how bad the situation really was for American tank crews in late 1944. The M4 Sherman was reliable, easy to fix, and fast enough to keep up with infantry, but against Germany's heavy armor it was badly outmatched in a straight fight. A Tiger tank carried thick armor that could shrug off frontal hits from most Sherman guns, while its powerful 88mm cannon could punch through American steel from distances the Sherman couldn't even answer back. Crews knew this, commanders knew this, and everyone understood that fighting a Tiger head-on was almost always suicide. American doctrine tried to solve this with numbers, coordination, and air support, but in the Ardennes the weather grounded planes and the forest broke units apart, leaving small groups of tanks to face German heavy armor alone, often without warning and usually without a way out. The numbers told the story better than any after-action report. A Sherman's 75mm gun could penetrate about 3 inches of armor at 500 yards, which meant nothing when facing a Tiger's frontal plate that measured nearly 4 inches thick, angled to deflect shots even more effectively. German tank crews joked that fighting Shermans was like hunting rabbits, and the kill ratios backed up their confidence with brutal clarity. That was exactly what happened when the Sherman rolled into a narrow clearing, engines loud against the frozen air, only to have a Tiger appear off its left side at close range, its turret already turning, already locked in, already ready to fire. The shot hit hard and clean, punching through the Sherman's armor like paper, and within seconds the inside of the tank turned into a furnace of fire, smoke, and screaming metal that no crew could survive for long. Getting out was the only option. The commander got his men clear, counting heads, checking for wounds, forcing himself to think while everything around them screamed danger, because German infantry would follow the tanks, and when they arrived, the chance of capture or death climbed by the minute. They moved low through the trees, using smoke and chaos for cover, boots crunching in snow that seemed impossibly loud against the background rumble of distant engines and artillery. Every shadow could hide an enemy soldier, every sound could mean discovery, and the cold bit through their uniforms as adrenaline started to fade and shock tried to set in. That's when they saw it sitting off the road, half hidden behind a stand of pines, dark yellow paint streaked with mud and snow, its long gun pointing uselessly toward the ground. It was a German Panther tank. At first it seemed impossible, because Panthers didn't get left behind unless something had gone very wrong, but as they got closer the reason became clear. One track was thrown, the engine deck was open, and no crew moved inside. The tank wasn't destroyed. It was abandoned. Maybe the crew had run out of fuel, maybe they'd taken fire and bailed, or maybe they panicked when American artillery started falling nearby earlier that day. But whatever the reason, a fully armed Panther sat waiting in the middle of enemy territory. The commander stared at it, heart pounding, mind racing, because this wasn't part of any plan, any training, or any manual he'd ever read, and yet the answer felt obvious in a way that scared him. They couldn't outrun German tanks on foot. They couldn't hide forever. And they couldn't fight tigers with rifles and grenades. But they could try something insane. Climbing into a Panther was like stepping into another world. Everything was labeled in German, the layout was unfamiliar, and the controls felt backwards compared to an American tank. But underneath the confusion, the basics were still there. Engine, transmission, gun controls, optics. Steel was steel. The commander put his crew where he thought they'd function best, his gunners sliding into the familiar position even though the sight picture looked different, his driver studying the pedals and levers with hands that knew how machines worked even when the language changed. They were tankers first, and tankers understood that all armored vehicles shared certain truths no matter which country built them. They worked the engine first, checking lines, pulling levers, trying switches, listening for any sign of life, and when the Panther finally roared to life, the sound felt unreal, deep and powerful, like waking a sleeping animal that had been dreaming of violence. Now comes the real danger. If German units saw a Panther moving without orders, without the right signals, or acting strangely, they'd open fire without hesitation, and one wrong move could turn their stolen tank into a coffin. So the commander made a bold choice. He'd act German. They listened to the radio, catching fragments of German chatter, recognizing patterns even if they didn't understand every word, and using those cues to move with confidence, staying in formation, matching speed, and avoiding anything that looked uncertain or suspicious. The Panther itself gave them an advantage they'd never had in a Sherman. Its 75mm gun was long, fast, and deadly, capable of punching through tiger-side armor at combat ranges, and its sloped armor offered protection the Sherman crews could only dream of having in a fight. For the first time that day, the commander felt like the odds had shifted just a little, and that feeling sharpened his focus instead of dulling it, because overconfidence would be fatal and one mistake would end everything they just gained. The first Tiger appeared at a road junction, massive and still, its crew unaware they were being watched by Americans sitting inside German steel. The commander studied its position, the angle of its armor, the way its turret pointed slightly away, and waited. He didn't fire right away. He moved closer, rolling forward slowly, confidently, using the Panther's shape and markings to blend in, closing the distance until the Tiger's side armor filled the gun sight and there was no room left for doubt or hesitation or second thoughts. Fire. The Panther's gun roared, the shell slammed into the Tiger's side, and the result was instant. Armor cracked. Flames burst outward. The Tiger shuddered, stopped, and began to burn, its crew scrambling out as smoke poured from every hatch. It worked. But one kill didn't mean safety, and the sound of battle always carried, especially among tanks, so the commander repositioned immediately, moving before anyone could trace the shot back to him or question why a Panther had fired without warning. That pattern would repeat itself again and again over the next hours. Move carefully. Blend in. Get close. Strike from the side or rear. Disappear. German tank crews trusted their Panthers, especially in mixed formations, and that trust became their weakness as the stolen Panther slipped among them like a wolf in the dark, close enough to smell the oil and exhaust, close enough to hear engines idle and crews talking on open hatches. The second Tiger fell near a frozen stream, hit from behind as it waited for orders, its thick rear armor no match for a well-placed shot at close range, and the explosion sent shockwaves through nearby units who suddenly realized something was very wrong but couldn't identify the threat. Radio traffic grew tense. Questions flew. Accusations followed. But confusion slowed response, and in armored warfare, seconds matter more than almost anything else because hesitation kills and uncertainty paralyzes even the best trained crews. The 3rd and 4th Tigers were taken in quick succession during a brief clash when German units tried to regroup, their commanders unsure who was friendly and who wasn't, hesitant to fire, afraid of hitting their own men in the chaos of battle where fog and smoke made identification nearly impossible. By now the American crew moved with grim focus, no cheering, no celebration, just quiet efficiency, because every engagement could be their last, and the enemy was adapting with each loss, growing more suspicious, more careful, more dangerous. The commander avoided frontal fights at all costs, knowing the Panther could still lose to a Tiger head-on, and instead relied on patience, positioning, and the simple fact that German crews didn't expect a Panther to hunt them like prey. By nightfall, the count stood at 6 destroyed Tigers, an unthinkable number for any single tank crew, let alone one that had started the day inside a burning Sherman with no plan beyond survival and no hope beyond the next few minutes. Darkness brought new dangers. Identification became harder. Shadows played tricks on tired eyes. One mistake could bring friendly fire from either side, and the Panther's engine noise carried far in the cold night air where sound traveled differently and every noise felt amplified by fear and exhaustion. Still, opportunity didn't disappear. It multiplied. 2 Tigers sat hull down near a crossroads, guarding a supply route, confident in their position and their armor, unaware that the Panther approaching from the tree line carried an American crew that knew exactly where to aim and exactly how to kill them. The commander waited until both tanks exposed their sides while adjusting positions, then fired twice in rapid order, each shot finding its mark, each Tiger erupting into fire before their crews could even react or understand what had happened to them. 8. The 9th came near dawn, during a brief skirmish when German units tried to pull back under pressure from Allied forces pushing in from the west. In the chaos, the Panther slipped behind a Tiger II, its massive turret turning too slowly to respond. One shot ended it. 9 Tigers destroyed by a tank that shouldn't have been there, commanded by a man who'd lost his own machine hours earlier and refused to accept the end of his story or the limits placed on him by circumstance. Staying any longer wasn't an option. German commanders would eventually piece together what had happened, and when they did, every gun in the area would turn toward that Panther with murderous intent and overwhelming force. The commander chose his moment, moving toward Allied lines carefully, avoiding contact, using terrain and timing instead of speed, and praying that American units wouldn't mistake him for the enemy and fire first without asking questions that dead men couldn't answer. The risk was real. American gunners had orders to shoot German armor on sight, and a Panther crossing into friendly territory was a terrifying sight without warning, especially after days of being hunted by German tanks that showed no mercy. He solved it the only way he could. Slowly, the Panther approached with its gun elevated, hatches open, crew visible, white cloth tied where it could be seen, and when American infantry finally spotted it, rifles came up, voices shouted, and fingers tightened on triggers that were seconds away from ending everything. Then the commander stood up in the hatch and waved. Recognition took seconds that felt like hours, but when it came, it brought disbelief, laughter, and a flood of questions that wouldn't stop for days as word spread through the division about what had happened in the frozen forest. The Panther was secured, examined, and rushed back for intelligence study, its combat use, radio setup, and battle damage providing valuable insight into German armor tactics at a time when every detail mattered and every advantage could save lives. The crew survived the war, their story spreading quietly through armored units, not as a legend shouted from rooftops, but as a reminder of what adaptability, training, and nerve could achieve when everything else fell apart and the only choice was to improvise or die. Looking back at that frozen battlefield, it's easy to focus on the numbers, the 9 Tigers, the stolen Panther, the burning Sherman left behind in the snow, but the real lesson runs deeper than any single fight or any single day of combat. War rewards those who think under pressure, who see tools where others see obstacles, and who understand that machines matter, but the people inside them matter more than all the armor and guns ever built. That American commander didn't win because the Panther was better than the Sherman, even though in many ways it was. He won because he refused to accept the limits placed on him by circumstance, doctrine, or fear, and because he understood that survival meant taking risks that seemed insane until they worked. By the end of the war, thousands of Shermans would be lost, hundreds of Tigers would be destroyed, and entire armies would move across Europe in waves of steel, fire, and smoke. But moments like this remind us that history can turn on a single decision made in seconds. Thanks for watching this story on WW2 Vault about the day an American tanker lost his Sherman, stole a Panther, and turned Germany's most feared armor against itself. If you want more true combat stories like this, hit subscribe because we've got plenty more waiting.